Hello, welcome to James's pre-fight, post-fight MMA show, where we recap all the important things happening in the sport of MMA, and I, your host James, try to explain to you what's going on in the sport and make it as easy as 1, 2, 3 for you to understand. We hope you enjoy the show. Welcome back, everybody, to Fans Assemble. We're here to talk about UFC 283, Teixeria versus Hill. Should be a good one. You know, we're first pay-per-view of the year, first time back in Brazil since 2020. Charles Oliveira fought Kevin Lee. Should be huge. You know, me and Mike always talk about home crowds and how it could affect you. Well, this by far is an environment that will affect you with Brazilian fans cheering that you're gonna die and things like that. So very good card, good representation of what's going on in Brazilian MMA right now. Should be great. Pay-per-view is something always strange. It always has to happen. So, me and Mike are ready. Let's get into it. So first fight on the card, first fight we're going to talk about is Gilbert Durinho Burns versus Neil, the Haitian sensation Magny. And I'm very glad Neil Magny finally picked out a nickname, and it was a good one. So Gilbert Burns is 20-5. He's 36 years old. He's 5'10", with a 71-inch reach. He's been alternating wins and losses. His last fight was against Hamza Chimaev of 2022, where he lost via decision, and then he beat Stephen Thompson via decision. And then before that, he lost to Kamaru Usman via TKO. And then Neil Magny is 27-10. He's 35 years old, 6'3", with an 80-inch reach. So he will have a gigantic 9-inch reach advantage over Gilbert Burns. And then he's altered. His last win was a sub win over D-Rod. Then he lost to Shavkat Rakhmonov. But Neil Magny's always been very consistent. One of the busiest fighters in the UFC. As you can see, he has 37 fights compared to Gilbert's 25. And he's 1 year younger than him. So there is quite a bit going on when it comes to the stats of these two guys. Gilbert, ADCC world champion and black belt. Magny, he's been fighting constantly. He fights one of the busiest schedules in the UFC. So should be a very good fight, pivotal fight, right? Because Gilbert Burns is ranked in the top 5, and then Neil Magny were to beat him, that would be a huge step for him, getting closer to that title shot, to his elusive first title shot. Mike, what do you think when you first looked at this fight between the Haitian sensation and Durinho?
Yeah, I think it feels like a similar fight, a well-balanced, even fight.
Mm-hmm.
Although I'm not as sure of that. Um,
Yeah, both.
Obviously,
Yeah, go ahead.
Magny
Sorry.
has a size advantage.
Mm-hmm.
He has more career wins, but that also can be, as a product of having more career fights, not necessarily an edge.
Mm-hmm.
But I think when you look at them statistically, you look at the style of fighting, very, very similar.
Both very well rounded. Yeah.
So I think on paper it is an even matchup. Depends on where you look. Some have Burns as a more strong favorite. Some have it, listed more evenly. But I happen to think going into this fight, I think that Burns does have the much stronger chance to win.
Yeah.
Burns is one of those fighters where, like, obviously he beat Woodley, and it seemed like, okay, this is going to changing the guard. Here comes the next big star. Um, he wasn't able to beat Usman. He wasn't able to beat Kamaev. Unable to win those really, really big fights.
Mm-hmm.
But he took Kamaev the distance. He almost took Usman the distance.
Yeah, he hurt Usman the first round as well, and
Yeah,
obviously the
like,
Hamza.
I just think Gilbert Burns is too good to lose this fight. And I'm a Neil Magny fan. I enjoy Neil Magny. Um, I just don't have the confidence in him going against Gilbert Burns. I think Gilbert Burns is just too good to lose this fight.
Yeah, this is not the type of competition he would lose to. Yeah. Do you Actually, I'll go into mine and I'll ask you some questions. So I agree with you. I think that one, this is just not the type of fight Gilbert usually loses, even though there is that big 9 inch reach advantage for Magny. And we've seen Gilbert have trouble with guys who, throw straight punches, but those guys are typically a little bit more powerful than Neil Magny, like, Usman and Chimaev. And I think a huge part of this fight is going to be the ground. I think that Burns is going to have very little trouble getting Neil Magny down. Neil, very good offensive wrestler, not the best when it comes to his defensive wrestling. And Gilbert, he has very different. He's not American or not Russian style, but it's very different type of wrestling going on. So I think and he knows he could take Magny down. And then we've seen Neil Magny. He's been submitted a couple times against Maya, against RDA, against Shavkat. So I think Burns is going to look for that. He's been talking about getting a finish for a while now. So I think that will be his. That's going to be the path to victory. Even on the feet, Neil Magny, I think he's probably overall a better striker. But you have the power of Gilbert, and then you have the calf kicks, which can play a huge part because Neil Magny's so long and tall, and he's kind of have like thin legs. So I think that could play a big part. Um, what do you think? So Mike, for me, I think Gilbert, he's just gonna get takedowns, and I think he's gonna try to find a sub as best as he can. Do you think he has a particular path to victory he has to stick to? Like, does he have to get it to the ground, or do you think I think he'll be okay in some spots on the feet, but I think he should take it to the ground if he wants a dominant win. Do you think there's any path to victory that Gilbert has to stick to, or do you think he could just has to play it safe, make sure you don't get caught up in the reach? What do you think?
Yeah, I think that in the case of Burns, right, I think obviously he can do very well for himself on the ground. Um, it's one of those things. I think he also has to find a way to be efficient striking. Obviously,
Mhm.
he doesn't want to create any risk for himself. Obviously, Magny has that size advantage,
Yeah,
uh,
the knees, the
height
straight
and
punches.
reach. Like, you don't want to find yourself in a position where you get damaged really hard in the stand up. But I think it's a combination. I think he is going to win the fight by decision. And that's just a combination of doing both things um, as efficiently as possible. You also got to do it as safely as possible.
Mhm.
So I think it's one of those things where it's about it's about efficiency, which really means just being safe and and creating an edge. And
Yeah, I think the efficiency thing, like you said, is key because Neil Magny, we know like this is like an incredible gas tank, and no offense to go, we've seen him get tired before, so I'm sure Neil is thinking if he could get Gilbert to maybe take some bad takedowns or stand on the edge of his range, like he could get him tired. But yeah, I agree with you. I think that's probably his probably number one goal should be to be efficient. So you have Neil Magny via decision. I actually think not Neil Magny. Excuse me. You have Gilbert. Excuse me, via decision. I'm actually gonna go Gilbert Burns. I think first round sub. I think he on the feet. I could see Neil Magny doing well if he could survive the beginning of this fight, but I just don't think so. I think he's gonna get him down very quickly, and I think he's gonna find a sub fairly quickly. I think it's gonna be one of those fights where it's like people are like, "Whoa!" Like, why did we talked? The lead up was more than the fight itself. I think, and that's no offense to Neil Magny. I just think you said a very good point. You're like Gilbert typically does not lose these type of fights, and it's a Neil is very well rounded, but it is somewhat there is a path to victory in my opinion on the ground. So
yeah,
you have Gilbert via decision, correct?
yeah. I just want to add. I mean, the only thing here is like, is this the beginning of like a downfall for Gilbert Burns?
That's
Like,
true. Yeah,
like
something.
obviously he's reached his heights, and then sometimes you kind of just see guys fall off the mountain. Like you get to the top, you can't,
That's very
you're
true.
almost there, and the big guys kind of just knock you down, and then you get to the lesser competition, you kind of just
Hmm.
It's almost like kind of what happened with just happened with Tuivasa, although it was much different because it's heavyweights and recent activity but
Hmm.
you know, things happen. I wouldn't be surprised if Magny finds a way like to Burns is kind of starting on maybe a little bit of a downward trend.
Yeah, like he
Um,
starts to be efficient. He gets tired. Maybe he underestimated
yeah,
Magny.
just to give Magny his credit where it's due, but yeah, I just it's really really hard for me to envision Burns losing.
Yeah, I think also like thank you for saying that because people will forget, but the before this fight was made, Gilbert Burns kept calling out Jorge Masvidal to fight in Brazil, and then obviously that fight didn't happen, and we all know like Gilbert and Jorge, that fight would be like huge implications, and there's a lot of talk. There'll be a lot of talk, a lot of drama. Of course, money. I think, opportunities, and now he's fighting someone in Neil Magny, who you and I say, his best asset is his consistency, but he's not known as being like this big cash cow. So there is something to look into that. And then Gilbert was saying like, "Oh, yeah, I didn't care if it was Neil. I just wanted to fight." So I do think you bring up a good point, right? There could be some factor of like Gilbert Burns maybe underestimating Neil Magny, and then he could find himself gassing and then Magny teeing off on him. So I think that was a very very good point actually. So going to the co-main, I'm very interested to see where you go with this. Deviveson Figueiredo versus Brandon Moreno 4. Uh, First time we ever had a quadrilogy in the UFC. Uh, the first fight, Deviveson was the champion. It was short notice for both guys. They fought the event before. It ended up being a draw. Right, Deviveson Figueiredo ended up hitting Brandon Moreno very hard in the huevos, and then he got that point taken away, and it ended up being a draw. And then the rematch happened. A lot of people noticed how Davison, maybe the weight cut was getting a little bit, maybe he was a little bit sick, and he ended up getting finished pretty quick. Not quickly, but he did get finished pretty easily. Very little resistance by submission, but he did get knocked down. He got hurt a couple times in that fight. And then the third fight, he trained with Jaime Cejudo, and then he ended up coming out very differently. More leg kicks in the game plan, more wrestling in the game plan, and he won via decision. And it was still a very good fight, very competitive fight. Some people argue who won, but Davison Figueiredo is your UFC flyweight champion. And then this fourth, so those last two fights was in California and then Arizona. So some people would say it's kind of like a Brandon Moreno type of crowd, and then but now it's going to be a Davison Figueiredo crowd going into this fourth one. Very very interesting. I've never heard of fighters being in the octagon with each other this long. So, and I think it's a special time to see that happen. So, what do you think, Mike? I teeter totter who's going to win this fight all the time. Oh, and let me read the tail of the tape actually. Davidson's 21-2, 21-2-1. He is 35 years old, 5'5" with 68-inch reach. He's coming off of one win. His last fight was a win, and then he lost with submission the fight before, and then it was a draw. He has not fought a single person who's not named Brandon Moreno since 2020. Brandon Moreno is 26, 20-6. He's 29 years old. He's 5'7" with 70-inch reach, and he is coming off of I believe his last one was a win, then a loss, then a win. So it's a very interesting fight when it comes to history and how the age could come into play as well. So what do you think, Mike? How do you think this? I teeter totter with this fight like all the time. Who are you leaning towards, and what do you see in this one?
Yeah, this is a really, really even fight, and obviously we've seen that over the course of the rivalry here and their history against one another.
Hmm.
Obviously, Figueiredo has the home crowd advantage now, but I think the one interesting thing here is that Moreno has fought since
The third fight.
the third fight, knocking out Kakara France, in Texas in July, I believe that was. Um,
Yes,
and so that's one of those things. Like, is Moreno a little more ready? He's had
a little
time.
bit more active.
He's
Yeah.
had time to think about someone else, kind of get a little more diversity in his competition. Figueiredo obviously also is, a little older.
Hmm.
Um, he's in his mid 30s. Moreno's still on the right side of 30. And you would think, especially, like what happened last time, I think Moreno is going to have learned a lot of lessons
Yeah.
from that last one. And I think he's gonna have to come out more aggressive. He's gonna need to be more accurate. He's gonna need to be stronger defensively. And, you know, it's really one of those tricky things. And I think if Moreno's gonna get stumped in this fight, it's gonna be early on, and you're gonna see right away that Figueredo is kind of just stronger mentally going
Mhm.
into this one. Um, but I feel more confident in Moreno.
Yeah, I think so I have a similar sentiment to that. I think Davison, like I think you pointed out the age. I think for me that will play a big part because Brandon Moreno, I never noticed this, but he's never been finished ever. It's like in a Davison, he's a great finisher. So the problem is like Brandon Moreno's probably gonna be there for like the whole 5 rounds. If he were to lose, he's gonna be like it's gonna go the distance most likely. I think that's like a huge problem for Davison Figueiredo. And then I feel like Figueiredo, he's kind of becoming a little bit like obviously he's older, he's 35, and we've had a couple of years. But I think like in terms of like athleticism, he is getting a little bit older. Like he doesn't take the shots as well as he used to. I think Brandon Moreno does a better job of like taking strikes, getting hit, getting rocked. He was dropped a couple of times in the last fight, but still he's able to keep going. Um, so, and do you think there's any part of the fight because we see now Davison hurt Brandon a couple of times, and we've seen Brandon hurt Davison a couple of times. Do you think there's any advantage in terms of skill, like that any of these two have? Like, oh, if Davison gets it on the ground, it's a wrap. Do you think there's anything like that or no?
Well, it's interesting when you look at the two fighters, right? And you kind of break them down. They are pretty evenly matched statistically. Obviously, it's a little trickier because, Figueiredo has age. Um, but when you look at it, Figueiredo is a much more accurate striker. And that's why I said earlier, like, Moreno needs to be much more accurate in this fight. He needs to make sure he lands as much as he can. Because he can't,
Hmm.
you know, last thing Moreno needs is another like questionable decision. Like this is a fight that needs a definitive ending,
Hmm.
and someone needs to really get it done and really end this the proper way. Um, he just needs to be more accurate, and I think Moreno's going to do a good job defending himself. It's just coming back, and he land as much as he needs to land. Um, and it's simple. And I
Yeah.
think
So
Moreno is better right now than
I
Figueroa.
I, I have to agree. So I'm also going to pick Brandon Moreno. I think his last fight against Kai, like you said, I think that was a huge, not advantage because he did take damage and he did get hurt a little bit, but I think it'll be a huge gift for him because Davis in his third fight, the leg kick was playing a huge part. And then Brandon just didn't know how to adjust in the fight. And then Kai Car France tries to do the same thing against him. And obviously they're not the same person, Kai and Davison. But you see Brandon changes his stance. He's a little bit more narrow. So I do think that that fight in between will really, really help him. And then like you said, I think the age is in the part where they are. Like I think Davison, not that Brandon's not good, but Davison, I think for my liking, he's always been a little bit more creative, but I think, like you said, I think the health, things like that will play a huge part. How do you think Brandon Moreno gets it done this time?
I'm gonna go with the third round TKO.
Okay, yeah, I can see
Nice
that.
and pretty.
I think on the feet.
Yeah, and
Like
I think
standing? Okay.
if that happens, the reason why I absolutely love that to happen is because I can't wait to see the crowd get silenced before the main event.
Yeah, it's gonna be huge. Like anybody. I mean, like these three are pretty big names in terms of MMA right now. Uh, yeah, I think I'm gonna go Brandon Moreno via a TKO like in the fourth round. I think late. I think he's gonna have to take some licks, and I think he's gonna get Davison tired. Davison does like so many things. Like he's so explosive. The weight cut, things like that. And then like you and I always say like pressure sometimes hurts you a little bit at home. So I think that could be his downfall possibly.
Yeah, I just worry about this fight sucking the atmosphere out away from the main event. Um, but like I said, if Moreno wins this fight with the finish, it's gonna absolutely just tear
He's
up the
gonna, yeah.
atmosphere.
Do
It's
you
gonna
think he
absolutely,
go? Do you think he can win by decision? I know usually sometimes if you go to
yeah,
the
I
hall,
mean, oh yeah, absolutely. Like I think the fight has potential to go as far
yeah,
as possible. Um, I don't want it to though. So, maybe I'm a little like picking here what I want to
uh-huh.
happen necessarily. I mean, I'd have no problem Figueiredo winning. I like both fighters, but I definitely want to finish, and I think everyone's really looking for a
Mhm.
finish in this
Yeah, and I think Davison, like for him, sadly, like I don't think the finish will be possible. Like it won't be that strong for him to do because Brandon's like, so tough to finish. Yeah. So going into the main event, so this fight, the way it was created, it was so wacky. Like we had last pay per view of the year 2022, we had Jan Blachowicz fighting Magomed Ankalaev. Then it ends up being a draw. Dana literally calls Glover and Hill before the two, before Jan and Ankalaev leave the octagon. Then they and then they make this fight for Brazil. It's a great fight in my opinion. I do think that there's some technical advantages going to one side and some physical advantage going to another, but it should be a good one. You have Glover Teixeira, the former UFC champion. He hasn't fought since June in Singapore. In this fight of the year candidate. Some people fight of the year. He's 33-8. He's 43 years old, so he is a bit older than Hill. He is 6'2" with a 76-inch reach. He is coming off of a loss to Yuri Prochazka, and then before that, he was on an incredible win streak. And then Jamhal Hill is 11-1, 31 years old, 6'3", or 79-inch reach. He is coming off of a pretty good win streak himself. His last loss was to Paul Craig back in 2021, where he broke his arm. He lost via submission in the first round. So I do think there is some things to look out for. Like Hill, he does like to box. So does Glover Teixeira. But Glover Teixeira also likes to wrestle. He has very, very good wrestling for MMA. He has very good jiu-jitsu for MMA. And in Hill, this is, if he were to win this fight, this would by far be the best fighter he would to be. So this is action-packed, I think. Somebody's going to get finished, in my opinion. And it's for the light heavyweight title, so how much better can we get to have our first main event of the pay-per-view calendar year? So, Mike, what do you see going into this fight?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's questions about Texas age.
Yeah,
And,
Teixeira.
yep, and I think this is one of those fights. Is it a changing of the guard moment? Obviously, Jamal Hill's been creating a lot of momentum for himself. Outside of the loss to Paul Craig, it's one of those things. You know, I worry for Hill going into this fight because of the environment. I think he'll be more affected by the environment than Moreno, given that he's
Mm-hmm.
younger and a lot of his most recent fights have been in the Apex,
Yeah,
in this COVID era of fighting. Now he's got to go into this hostile environment in Brazil.
yeah, and he doesn't fight in front of a crowd that often to begin with, like you're saying.
No, the last time he did, he lost. In Arizona at 263.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so it's an interesting dilemma for him. Like, I think it's just a matter of like, is Teixeira, is he,
Old, like washed, right?
yeah, like, I mean, I don't know. I mean, because he went pretty far his last fight, at 275. You know, but like a lot
Yeah,
can change in 6 7 months.
yeah,
It's
and
not.
it was a war, right? It wasn't like a little like they just touched each other, right? So
Yeah, a lot can change. Um, I do feel confident. Teixeira can win this one on the ground.
mhm.
Um, the only reason I just, I don't trust Hill.
Yeah,
You know,
like I
I
see what you mean. Like his last fight against Santos, it was fun, finish, but he got taken down a couple times,
yeah,
and then you,
and
yeah, go ahead.
Hill obviously, like, you look at it like he's much more heavier of a striker. He's gonna land more, but like, it's also in the smaller sample size of a career, so I don't want to overlook into that. It's still for Teixeira
Hmm.
to to hold on to and maintain his status in the light heavyweight division. I don't think he's gonna fold here.
So I'm glad you said that because I have like a. So you're picking, you're leaning towards Glover, right?
Yeah.
I'm glad you said that because for me, it just kind of all comes down to like, is Glover Teixeira old? Like, is he obviously he's old? I mean, like, is he like done? Right? Like you said, like the war that he had with Yuri, has it changed him? But I think you brought up a good point. Like, I think on the feet, like obviously Jamal Hill, like you said, like he has volume and tends to strike more. But I think Glover on the feet, he could probably hang with him if he wanted to. Like not for too long, but I think he could. Maybe in the middle of the fight, or the end, like towards the end of the round, things like that. But I think the wrestling is going to be a huge, huge part of this fight. I think the grappling, like Hill, like he hasn't fought anybody who's like willing to take him down that much. And then you got Thiago, who's not known for grappling at all, and he's taking him down. Uh, and I know Hill, like his big thing is like, oh, I'm the most technical fighter in this division. I don't think so. You ever notice his stance is a little strange, Mike? Like the way he stands, like
Yeah.
his butt is out a little bit. I always find that kind of interesting. And it's like, so I always find that kind of interesting. But that's something that always grabs my attention. But I think the ground will be a huge part. I think that he may lead himself into getting hit a lot because of the way he stands. Um, so, but I'm going to put on my MMA conspiracy hat, Mike, and I just gave you all these reasons why I agree with you that Glover's better than him. But I'm going to go Jamal Hill. I'm going to go sub-minute round one knockout. I'm going to go that hard. I think I'm going full conspiracy. I'm going to say that the MMA gods do not want a Brazilian to reclaim their title in Brazil. So that's my only logic. So there you go.
Man, you just want the crowd to suffer, don't you?
I'm just thinking, wouldn't it be great if Glover Teixeira were to win a title in Brazil? And then I'm like, yes, well, we can't have that though, Mike. We can't have that. We
Well,
can't have,
I feel like
yeah.
it's written in stone after what happened with the last card for him to
Like he was so close, right?
right, and I feel like now it's kind of just written in stone, like it's written and set up for him to get the title
Yeah.
after everything that just happened with
He
in the
made a good.
division.
Also, like if that fight went the distance, if he didn't tap or he could have gone out or whatever, they said the judges would have given it to him. Like it would have been unanimous. So you do bring up a very, very good point. But me, I'm just being I'm being a pessimist. That's all I'm doing right now. So how do you think? I think Hill cannot win this fight unless it's by early knockout. I think if it goes later, he's gonna get taken down and he's gonna like suffer on the ground. I think he has to get an early finish. Like it has to be like they don't even touch and then like he knocks Glover out. How do you think Teixeira gets it done? Like finish or in
I'm
order?
gonna go with decision.
Okay.
I'm gonna give Hill a consolation.
Hmm.
I'm gonna give him a Pirate victory, and I'm gonna go to Shara by decision. And I think Hill's gonna keep himself from getting absolutely Uh,
Destroyed, right? Finished.
yeah, I think he's going to be able to, and I think Teixeira is just going to kind of keep him down on the ground for a long time. And
Hmm.
maybe, and that's why I said, like, I worry about the fight before it taking all the air out of the room, because I could see this one ending up being a little boring. After if figure uh, and Moreno being a barn burner,
Yeah.
I could see this one being a little boring,
I can
and
see this being one-way traffic, yeah, for some.
Teixeira just keeps him down on the ground, but I mean, for a main event fight, like, it's a long, long time. So, like in a 3 rounder, I could see Teixeira definitely winning it by decision. But I think just the distance of the fight creates the possibility of the finish. Um, like,
Hmm.
who knows? Maybe Jamhal Hill just slips up and gets subbed.
Yeah,
Um, but
could happen.
I don't see him getting finished, by knockout or anything.
Yeah.
I think he's tougher than that.
I think if he were to get finished, right, it would happen on the ground, most likely.
Yeah.
He seems very tough. He seems very durable on the feet. Yeah. So, I'm going conspiracy hat me. I'm going, I'm going to say he'll be some kind of viral thing. And then
Yeah.
what's up?
I mean, it'd be a great way to start the new year, right? And we
That'd
saw
be
a lot
great.
of Pereira and O'Malley and all these crazy things that happened in 22. Pavlovich over Tuivasa, like, you keep using some excitement. I ain't gonna
Mhm.
complain if that happens, but
But to me, I could see. I'm not saying this is going to be my pick, but I could see Glover Teixeira just like going out there, getting a takedown, hitting huge strikes, and then like the ref stops it because like he in my opinion is just that good on top. Like you watch like a lot of his fights with me, like this dude is like crushing guys. So I can see that happening, and then like you said, like Hill, it's sort of hard because the sample size is not the biggest when it comes to fighting, and then it's not the biggest when it comes to like a guy who is like willing to grapple. So I think you did bring up a good point. I remember we are talking about it off camera. Boy, like this fight, it's like a lot of outcomes could happen, especially for Glover. So yeah, it'd be cool to see a Brazilian champion though, like get crowned in Brazil. But you know me, right? I'm just gonna say that's too nice. The MMA gods won't allow it. So, so thank you guys for listening. I hope you enjoyed it because we enjoyed making it. Hopefully, this card stays together because we are recording this very well in advance. Mike is afraid he has PTSD ever since the Hamzat thing. So hopefully nothing will. Even though this fight, if something goes wrong at the top, you're not going to be able to be like Jamhal Hill's fighting Gilbert Burns or something like that. So you know, hopefully it stays together. Talk to you guys another time. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel. Please subscribe to our podcasting platforms. We can have more great podcasts like the one we just did with Ray, which should be coming out. Sure, already came out at this point when this video comes out. But see you all next time. Bye. Thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you were listening to, please subscribe to Fans Assemble. And if you can, please give us a rating. Do it for the audio world. They need you.